and we do have a quorum. So I will call to order the Peninsula RPTO Executive Board meeting. Oh, there's Lindsay. Okay. And as I normally do for those who will be watching this on our website or viewing in our audience today, I will introduce our participants. I will do that by going across the people on the screen as I see them. So I will start with Sarah Black. She's the coordinator for the Peninsula RPTO. I am Beck Ashby. I'm a city council person from the city of Port Orchard. And I am chair of the RPTO this year. Sarah Crouch is with Jefferson Transit, our physical agent. Michael Cardwell is with the Quinault Indian Nation. Commissioner Dick Taylor is with the Port of Shelton. David Fort is with the Kitsap County Public Works Department. Ed Coviello is, again, one of our coordinators. He's an employee of Kitsap Transit. Marty must have a last name. Allen, is that right? He is with the Snohomish tribe. John Clausen is executive director of Kitsap Transit. Amy Asher is executive director of Mason Transit. Rachel Anderson is a council person from the city of Sequim. Steve Gray is mimicking his screen because the screen is gray this morning. He's with the Public Works Department for Clallam County. Kate Dean is a commissioner for Jefferson County. Wendy Clark Getson represents the Jamestown Sklallam tribe. Tammy Rupert is the executive director of Jefferson Transit. Deidre Peterson is a council member with the city of Shelton. Lindsay Schwarum Warren is a council member with the city of Port Angeles. Dennis Engel is with the Department of Transportation. Gary Anderson is a commissioner for the Port of Bremerton. Randy Netherland is a commissioner with Mason County. Ted Jackson is a port commissioner from the Port of Allen. And Tracy Parker represents the Squaxin Island tribe. So those are our members in attendance today. We do have a quorum, and if anyone else joins us, I will acknowledge them. Before we get into our agenda, I just want to do one little housekeeping thing. And we had discussed as a group a hybrid or meeting in person a couple times a year starting in February of 2022. At our executive committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, the executive committee felt that it was more prudent on our part if we continued meeting on Zoom in a virtual setting for our February meeting. The COVID pandemic has not let up on us yet, and it seems to be a prudent idea to continue to meet in Zoom. If any of you have an objection to that, let us know. But if not, we will see you on the computer screen at least one more time. And with that, we will go down to our agenda. Do we have an approval of the agenda for today?
So moved.
Thank you, Dick.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve today's agenda. Is there anyone who would vote in opposition to that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would vote in opposition to that motion? The motion passes with unanimous consent. We will go on down to our consent calendar. We have 4 items on it today: the minutes from our last meeting in October, approval of our first quarterly invoice for this biennium, the extended interlocal agreement with Kitsap County for our legal services, and the contract extension for our RPTO coordinator services. Is there anyone who would wish to move an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, we will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Moved. Thank you. Was there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there anyone, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Is there anyone who would be voting in opposition to that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone voting in opposition to that motion? The consent calendar is approved as presented. Moving on down the agenda, we have another action item, and I believe this is one Thera will lead the discussion on. It's for the follow-up for our EV readiness activities. Thera?
Yeah, thank you. And this is coming to you a second time. We brought it to you in October. This is, we're looking for approval from the board to sort of allocate about $4,000 out of the monies earmarked in task 2 for regional transportation planning, to allocate about $4,000 of that to advance the readiness of the region for electric vehicles, EV readiness. And so what we talked to you about at your last meeting were the sort of activities that we wanted to undertake to support PRTPO's efforts in this arena. And so I'm coming back to you today to get your action, answer any questions that you might have. And then what we would do is it would just be an administrative amendment of the UPWP. That's why there's not a UPWP resolution here, because the activities are already sort of described. This would just put the specifics in there. And then we will continue working towards those efforts throughout the rest of this fiscal year. So with that, I would turn it over to you for any questions that you might have. And then, like I said, looking for your approval to formally incorporate this into our work program.
Are there any comments on the EV readiness program and the activities we'll be making? Thank you, Commissioner Dean.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in support of this. I was on a call last night with Congressman Kilmer, Governor Inslee, a couple members of the legislature, and we know that there's going to be significant funding coming from the feds and the state for EV infrastructure, and the better prepared we are to take advantage of that, the more likely we are to get those funds in this region. So I think this is really timely. I'm glad we're a little bit ahead of the curve on this, and I appreciate staff's efforts to have it before us, before there's a feeding frenzy for these funds. So I'm really happy to see it continue and support the proposal.
I would like to just remind everyone, when you look at your agenda, when it says requested action, that is a potential motion, words for a motion. So is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve the proposed activities? Kate, is that what your hand is up for? Or did you not take it down?
I just haven't lowered it.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of a $4,000 expenditure for the electronic vehicle infrastructure and the study to find the best ways to use it.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this? I know that this has been a well-received activity we've done. I know that our resource page is used quite extensively. David?
Yeah, but one thing though we do have to be a little bit aware of is that all of our regional stuff is on regional routes going through. While EV is going to have a huge thing, especially with the equity of trying to get charging stations into underserved residential communities for all intents and purposes. And so just that when we go forward this, that we do acknowledge that and how to move forward those concepts. At the same time, we're trying to do this regional, make sure the regional travel has their every whatever miles, but also how do you do the localized stuff that doesn't get onto the regional maps.
Agreed. And I will also say that sometimes it feels like some of our region is all underserved. So, Michael?
Certainly, one of the things I discussed earlier before the meeting was the fact that the entire region is connected. And I believe that certainly there are missing links in the electrification of the Western State highways. And certainly I am in support of this resolution and action, being a resident on US 101, and certainly a grant writer, and certainly a member of a native sovereign nation. I believe that, and I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I believe that the tribal economic development properties, let's call them, are looking to develop charging stations at casino parking lots. So consequently, that will be a new strategy into bringing in customers, etc. Because again, it takes a few hours to charge up a battery to go from here to there. So again, there's an opportunity to create a win-win situation, and as mentioned by the previous speakers, certainly infrastructure money is coming, so let's do what we can in order to obtain some of that funds for this next calendar year. I mean, it's certainly the same fiscal year, and that is that. So I need to lower my hand now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sarah.
And Beck, if I could just, I think David raised a really good point, and if people haven't looked at the EV resources page in a while, I encourage you to take a look out there. City of Sequim is a city that's done a lot of really good work locally with its ordinances, both for infrastructure on the streets, but also, this is really important at the local level, building codes and things like that. So, and design standards. So we've compiled the resources that we know of, but if as you're poking around out there, you know of other good local resources, because we're not obviously developing this, but if you do know of good local resources that maybe you have or somebody else has that you want us to put up there and share, please, there's a contact us button right there, and you can get in touch and point us in the right direction. So yes, it's about the entire region, not just that region's highways.
Thank you. Wendy.
Hi, Madam Chair. Could you please clarify the motion that's before us again? I'm reading in attachment E that there's some additional budgetary considerations, that whether we're just looking at the 4,000, or are we looking additionally into the future?
The motion, Randy definitely said $4,000. The proposed motion that we had was to approve the proposed activities and budget in task 2 of the adopted UPWP to support greater EV readiness in the Peninsula region. But I do believe right now we are just looking for the $4,000 and not additional monies. That would be a discussion for a future discussion.
Okay.
Are there any additional comments on the EV readiness motion? Hearing none, we have a motion, and it has been seconded to approve the proposed activities and the budget amendment in task 2 of the adopted UPWP to support the greater EV readiness in the Peninsula region. Is there anyone who would be desiring to vote against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. Moving on down the agenda, we have some amendments to the RTIP, and I believe we had a last minute one come in late last evening. So we will get a verbal report on that. Ed, I will turn the discussion to you.
Good morning, Beck, and good morning, Executive Board. As Beck mentioned, we had a last minute addition. So the staff report that you see has 5 proposed RTIP projects to be amended. However, we'll have 6. Of the 5, 2 were brought before the TAC last month, and the TAC is recommending to you at the board that the Skokomish Tribe project, which is a safe routes to school pedestrian-oriented safety project, and the Jamestown Slalom project be amended into the RTIP. And also the Skokomish project will also go into the STIP. Below that on the staff report, you'll see 3 other projects, 2 from the city of Shelton and 1 from Jefferson County. I'm also asking that those projects be included in this amended RTIP, as well as amended into the next STIP in January. And then the 6th project, I'll pull that up on my screen. Just a moment. And I'll pull that up here. Let me know, I have a dual monitor, so let me know if you can see it now or not. Can you see that project now?
Yes.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so this project from WSDOT Olympic Region is already in the RTIP and STIP. However, it needs to be amended because the funding increased quite a bit on it.
Excuse me, what
Yes.
was it is the original document that doesn't include the new project. So
Yeah,
you had it up a minute ago.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There you
There
go.
Yep.
Okay, it's the dual monitor thing. I'm not used to that. So here's the project here, and it's asking for an increase of National Highway Preservation. Is that what that is? Funding. So that's the 6th project that we're asking to bring into the RTIP and the STIP. Stop sharing. Open up to questions, concerns. It's always nice to help out the members here to help get their projects moving forward.
Commissioner Dean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ed, I just was able to glance at that quickly. The added project is Washed Out the sponsor of that project, is that correct?
Yes, yes, Olympic Region.
Great, thank you.
And I think it's actually already in the STIP. So the board approved it in the last, like when it approved the RTIP. The way it works is that for WashDOT got a whole lot more money for this project. And they want to go to add in January, but before they can go to add, that extra money has to be added into the STIP. And so that's what this is doing. It's not really adding a new project, it's adding money to a project that's already there.
Also, I just had a request from Marty because he did a really nice presentation to the TAC on that Safe Routes to School project. And I think he would like to do that again. He has some nice graphics to display the project. So.
Okay, let's let Wendy, she raised her hand, let's do that, and then if
Okay.
we can see the Marty's presentation.
I just wanted to let everyone know I'm at a disadvantage because I only see a staff report that's dated December 10th. Sorry, a staff report that's dated November 29th, and I was not aware of the additional projects beyond the 2 that went to the TAC. But I am all for helping out the members, and it sounds like it's very important to get the STIP accomplished for a January amendment.
Thank you, Wendy. I too am looking at an older staff report. I'm not sure why ours didn't get updated or.
Yeah, it just got updated a day or 2 ago
We
on our
posted
website.
it on we posted it on you should have gotten an updated Zoom link. I apologize. It should have said like revised agenda attached.
Well, you know what, Sarah, some of us
Sorry
are
about
old,
that.
and I printed mine over the weekend.
That would be
So that would be it. I'm an old-fashioned paper kind of gal, so
Yeah,
that's it.
sorry.
But I do appreciate what Wendy said. I think those are all valuable projects for our members. So Ed, do you want to do Marty's presentation or put it up or however that's going to work?
I think Marty's going to do that. So I was asking if Sarah can give him rights to make that happen.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thanks.
Come on. Sorry, I'm just doing something. Marty. Sure, I'll make you co-host. Okay, Marty, you should be able to share. I thought you were able to share anyhow, but you should be able to share.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the time. Good morning, everybody. Share screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen okay? Is it showing up?
No,
No,
Let me see what's going on here. Okay. How about now?
Well, we
There you go.
see your screen, but we don't see the presentation.
Okay. So this is, can you see the vicinity map here?
No,
file. You need to open up that file for us to see it.
I'm sorry about that.
there you go.
There you go.
Okay, see the vicinity map? So this is the project here. It's there was a sidewalk that was put in. I think it was a Safe Routes to School project before I started working here, but along 106 here, it has the arrow showing where the Hipkina School is, just about maybe a quarter mile from that arrow there towards the on Highway 106. And right here in the red that's where the sidewalk ends right there. And it comes down to Reservation Road, Highway 106, then goes down Reservation Road right here to where existing sidewalk ends right near our education building. And then there's a little strip along Travel Center Road that needs to be filled in too, because it stops right down there towards the southern part of the map there. And we're just trying to get all our sidewalks connected, because there's a lot of spaces where they just dead end, and we want to make it safer for our children and anybody, all the pedestrians that, you know, like to walk or bike or whatever. So I'd like to thank Ed and Thera too, because they helped me quite a bit by putting it into the SIP right away for me. It's one of the things that needed to be done for WSDOT. So yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm not sure if there's any other files that I wanted to share. I know that we just did picked the engineering firm to do our design for us. We're going to be going in design phase early next year sometime. So yeah, I really appreciate that, all the help that I got with this project. Was there something else that I showed too, Ed, that I don't know if there was anything else that I shared besides the vicinity map?
This is what I remember, and I remember the detailed description you gave as well.
Okay. Yeah, but it'd be nice to get all our sidewalks connected, because there's a lot of gaps in it, like I said. And I know I did the new sidewalk here about 4 or 5 years ago along Reservation Road 2 that really needed to be done, because we had a trail there, but a lot of people didn't like using it, and people were still walking on the road, and it's really dangerous. I had an uncle that got hit one time and broke both his legs walking right down Reservation Road at nighttime. And I had one of my cousins too got hit by a car walking down the road like that at nighttime and broke his hips, both his hips. So there's been a lot of injuries due to, you know, not having space for people to walk on. So
Marty, we really appreciate the presentation. And I know that 106 is a well-traveled road. And I believe it would be important to have sidewalks on that road, not only for your school children, but for the public. I happen to go down there quite a bit, and it's a very busy area.
yeah, it
So
is.
with that, are there any other questions on the amendments that we're making to the RTIP? And if not, we could propose a motion. And when I'm looking at the proposed motion on the sheet I have, it would be in not quite complete. But I would, the motion, Gary, please.
Just have a question. In the plan, is there sufficient crosswalks and curb cuts and things like that to make it as safe as possible?
On this project?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have there's an existing crosswalk at the end there and on the reservation road, and everything's ADA compliant. Yes, thank you.
I would imagine Marty had said that they're just going out for design. So I would imagine that a lot of those details, Commissioner Anderson will be more forthcoming once they get there further along in their design work on it.
I see.
Is Thera?
Beck, I just wanted to let you know that I have sent out that revised staff report to everybody via email. So you will have it with all the project descriptions that Ed referenced for the 5 projects that we knew of going, before last night, and then the 6th project. And in that updated staff report, the requested action would be to approve now the 6 proposed transportation improvement program project amendments as presented. And then, like I said, they're all spelled out.
Thank you. Is there someone who would like to make the motion?
So moved.
Chair,
So moved.
I second.
Okay. Is there further discussion on the 6 RTIP amendments that we will be approving? Seeing none, we do have a motion and a second to approve the 6 RTIP amendments that have been detailed for us in the staff report. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I'll ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? If not, the motion passes with unanimous consent. And for those of you who are new, relatively new to the RTPO, we do have a policy on how to execute RTIP amendments. And we do have an expedited one, which DOT took advantage of last night. So with that, we will move on down to our next agenda item, which is the Transportation Alternative Program launch. Thera, I believe this is your subject.
Yeah, we're coming to you for those of you who've been around for a while. We are revisiting, we're coming back to do another call for projects for transportation alternatives. For those of you who were not here 2 years ago, transportation alternatives is a particular color of federal transportation money that PRTPO has a state responsibility to help administer. And so 2 years ago, PRTPO established a process for administering this program, and it seemed to be fairly successful. People were comfortable with it at the end of that process. And so it called for sort of a biennial process after that, every 2 years. And so this is the launch of that process coming to you today to sort of begin that kickoff. And we will come back to you in February for your approval and sort of formal launch of it. This is a funding program that is targeted. It's a catch-all of projects, pretty much everything other than your basic road construction or transit acquisition. It's a lot of bicycle pedestrian emphasis, safe routes to school, environmental projects. My favorite, the control and removal of outdoor advertising. And just a whole array. There are a very, very long list of eligible project types. The details that are spelled out here, again, it's the same framework that we used before. The amount of funding that will be available is frankly not very much. It's not a very big funding program. $413,500 is what we're planning for. The passage of the new federal infrastructure bill may possibly increase this amount before the project awards are made. And if that happens, we will just roll that extra funding increase into this. So it's possible that there could be some more money, but it won't be astronomical amounts more. What we're hearing is maybe a 15% bump, which if that's the case, we're looking at maybe like another $30,000. So when you're talking about federal money, that's not really anything to get very excited about. The process that we used before, and which this is mimicking, we would issue a call for projects no later than the end of February. There are various stages of the process laid out in here, but it would all come back to you as the executive board to make a decision in June. And this would be one of those times where it would come to you just in one reading. You would receive the technical advisory committee's recommendation and the project proposals, and then we would be asking you to make a recommendation on funding at that one meeting. We are programming ahead a little bit, so that's how we do this. Federal money is complicated to use, and jurisdictions need a little bit of advance notice if they're going to be putting federal money on a project. So with the process that we concluded 2 years ago, we programmed ahead through federal fiscal year 2024. This will take us through fiscal years 2025 and 2026 as laid out in here. We expect that those projects could go to construction as early as 2024, but we might even be able to get them to construction sooner. So I think with that, I'll stop sort of my briefing and answer any questions that you might have about the program. Like I said, we'll be bringing it back to you next month. We'll also include at that time, by then we would have gone through the TAC with this, the sort of the informational materials that we provide to project sponsors that provide some education on what the funding program is all about and how our process works. So we'll have a little bit more information for you at your next meeting, but this is the gist of it right here. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. And again, this is just a first reading today.
Commissioner Dean, and then Wendy.
Yeah, just a question. I'm not familiar with this program, so appreciate getting up to speed. So given the complications of using federal funds, does the TAC tend to prioritize giving towards one project, one or two larger projects versus kind of spreading it further across more jurisdictions?
I would.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to jump in and say that we had not had transportation alternatives competition for several years. And we had 2 years ago, we worked with I think it was local programs. We worked with DOT, and we were able to put money out further. And we had maybe it was close to 1.2 million that we obligated or awarded at that time. So Commissioner Dean, at that time, we were able to give some fairly good awards to some projects. But now we're down again to 400,000, and so much has to go to rural, so much has to go to urban. And so they spread it out as best they can. I think the TAC does a remarkable job of evaluating and getting dollars where they think it will do the region the most good. Did I summarize that okay there?
Yeah. And what we provide in the way of the guidelines is we say that the executive board would like to fund as many projects as they can. However, it's not very much money, and you really don't want a lot of small federal projects. It's just not good for anybody. So it's we hate to say like nothing more than 250, if you wanted to, if there is the project that merits all the funding, that if that is your funding priority, then you should be able to do it. But the way we word it in here is that if you are asking for all the money, if a jurisdiction is asking for the whole pot of money, they better be able to explain why the region should put its entire allocation of funding on that project. You know, it should be a very compelling case that you all are looking at that point.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you. I'm so glad this is a first reading because there's so much to consider. And one of the things that concerns me in terms of the executive board supporting and thinking ahead of projects is this necessity to proceed earlier if at all possible. Do we have clarity or even possibly a guarantee that projects that get awarded with 2025 and 2026 funds, that they could actually proceed into obligation in 2023 or 2024?
Oh, I haven't guaranteed anything. 2024 is actually the beginning of federal fiscal year 2025. So, I mean, that's that. What we would look for, though, because the dollar amount, what I lay out in here, because the dollar amount is so low, and if you've got a project that you want to have go early, we would like to be able to obtain that, but we will have those details by the time that we do the call for projects. We will also, by the time we do the call for projects, have assurance from WSDOT or confirmation from WSDOT whether or not we actually have to subdivide this little tiny pot of money into urban and rural targets. Or can we sort of, as the region, because our dollar amounts are so low, wouldn't it make more sense to look at it averaged over time? Those are questions we do not yet have answered, but we will have that before the end of February.
Excellent. Those are all good things to find out. I think it's a huge responsibility for the applicant agency to have their projects in their planning documents, in their TIPs, and that takes some good planning ahead.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And we have this particular conversation now, but later down our agenda, we will dive a little deeper into the use of federal dollars. And Kate, I'm assuming that you have your hand raised from before. Okay, thank you. So that was the first reading. Are there any more questions or comments on the Transportation Alternative Program? We wanted to introduce it to you today, and then TAC will be working on it, and it will come back before we do the call for projects. But it is a fairly, I don't want to say condensed time frame, but there is a time frame for the actual activity and the awards. So we will, Kate, go ahead. Except you're muted now.
Sorry about that. Quick question, and sorry because I'm new to this board, right. So trying to understand, and we lost our transportation planner, Wendy, so glad that you moved on to Jamestown. Glad for you, but we miss you dearly, but we are without a transportation planner right now, so it would just be helpful for me to understand, do you have contact with our, in our case, Public Works, when funding opportunities come up like this? Is that information disseminated to staff, or should board members be disseminating that information to our staff?
I disseminate it to the staff who I know of. So if there are changes in staffing on your end, this would probably go to Monty. So, you know, if there's somebody else that it should go to, let me know. But you will also know. You will know when we launch. So if you know, but it should really be my responsibility as long as I know who to get it to.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah.
A lot of moving pieces, always. Is there anything else on the Transportation Alternatives Program launch? Again, you will get more information in February, more detailed information, and then we will have the competition later this spring. So we will go on now down to the legislative forum follow-up.
Got a
And-
biennial review, Beck. There's
Oh,
an agenda item.
I went right over it. I did.
Easy to do. Easy to do.
Easy to do. Yes, we are required every 2 years to make sure our regional transportation plan is current. And I believe we have gone through some activity for that. Sarah, would you like to describe that for us?
Sure. This is one of those parts of the RCW that has not really been, people haven't paid a lot of attention to for the last 30 years, but WashDOT is paying attention to it now. And so that RCW says that every 2 years, once we adopt our plan, we need to do a biennial currency review of the RTP and make sure that it's still current, or do we need to stop what we're doing and go update the plan again? And so because it had not been done before in this region, we were developing this from scratch. We took sort of a two-pronged approach at it. One was to compare the regional transportation plan, which was adopted in October of 2019 for a 2040 planning horizon. We compared that plan to the RCW requirements, and they're spelled out, they're documented in this little brief, and affirmed that it does still satisfy those RCW requirements. But we also, I think, I would like to say more importantly than that, we're also looking at it to see if it still supports the executive board in its decision-making processes and in its work program direction. You know, does it meet your needs? And you know, in looking at it, it seems that it does. It's, you know, your work program is fulfilling the regional transportation plan. It is informing the executive board's legislative priorities and follow-up activities. So the staff brief that was prepared affirmed that the RTP is still current. We don't need to stop what we're doing. It still serves a function. It's the intended function. We took that to the TAC in November. The TAC agreed and recommended that the board accept this. This is coming to you today for your first reading to answer any questions that you have, or any concerns that you might have with it, that perhaps you feel that the plan does not meet the board, the PRTPO's needs anymore. This would be the time to bring that up. We would then bring it back to you, assuming that there's generally support for it. We will bring it back to you for approval in February, and then just forward it on to WashDOT. I will say that a lot of the stuff that you all do as an executive board has a lot of value add to the region and to the members. And some of the things that you do as a board are sort of to satisfy administrative bureaucratic requirements. And I would say that this tends to fall more in that latter one than the former one. So we've tried to keep this a pretty efficient process. Again, if you disagree with that and you think that this should be a very different kind of process, if you have concerns with the RTP, this would be a good time to bring that up. So, and if it's appropriate to you, if there's little concern with it, we'd like to just put it on the consent calendar at your next meeting, unless, again, there's a lot of concern or discussion about this. So with that, I turn it over to you for your questions and discussion.
I would say that I'm sure that we have all just spent countless hours reviewing the RTP in front of this meeting. But, so I personally think it still continues to meet our needs. And I believe that in 2 more years, we're going to be required to do an update of it. I believe that we do the update every 4 years. And because of the RTP that we adopted in 2019, that is what caused us to move into the EV work that we've been doing. So I have found the document useful and helped keep us doing the work we needed to do. Amy?
Yeah, I agree. I've spent time reading through it as a new member, and it seems fairly current. And I like that this board is continuing to evolve, even without having to, need to check in on just a 2-year cycle. And I think it makes a lot of sense to put it on the consent calendar for our next meeting.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to make comment or have questions? Marty.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I have to review mine and, update it once in a while, but it's one of those things like, don't fix it if it ain't broken. And usually when they are updated, it's just very little part of it that needs updating, like the projects that are on it. After 4 years, you got to put new projects on there, the ones that were done, take them off and things like that. So that's what my little experience. Just wanted to share that. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah. I think I'm not hearing I heard support of acknowledging that the RTIP is current, and I've heard support for just bringing that forward on the consent agenda in February. So there, I think that's our direction for that item. Okay. And now we can get down to the one I just jumped as far ahead to, and that is a follow-up on our legislative forum. Did you want to take that, Sarah? Or I would just, we'll get into this a little bit more, but our legislative forum was, I thought, well attended. I thought it was well received. There was a lot of conversation with our legislators. Representative Theringer and Representative Chapman from the 24th attended, Senator Rolfes from the 23rd, and Representative Griffey from the 35th. Chapman and Griffey are both on the Transportation Committee. We had some action items or actionable items that came out of that. One is all 4 of our legislators were supportive of the bill being brought forward to extend the time for the sales tax on transportation benefit districts. And I believe we have 3 members who have voted in sales tax for the transportation benefit district. The way the RCW is written currently, you can only have those for 2 terms, 2 10-year terms, so that they would sunset after 20 years. The proposal is that it would require vote or approval, but that it would not sunset in 2 years. And I'm not sure whether the bill is going to come through as indefinite or some other time frame, but all 4 of the legislators agreed that they could support that. I am trying to remember, we had 4 things they were willing to support us on.
I'm sorry. They were also very interested in the federal funding issue that small rural local agencies contend with. And we were very clear that we were talking about the Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason County communities and the challenges. And one of the things that jumped out at me was that at least I think at least Theringer, but a couple of others, I think Senator Rolfes as well, thought that this had already been dealt with. So they were surprised to hear that small local agencies were still using federal transportation funds, small amounts of federal transportation funds for projects. So that was something that they agreed among the 4 of themselves that they could work across the aisle on to help support resolving some of these challenges for local agencies. Yeah.
Yes, and so that's what we're bringing forth today is a further discussion. What the legislators told us is that they were happy to work with us, but they would like us to come forward with the proposal, with the solution. And we felt, and our conversation with them was that we would determine what that solution would look like. We would work through DOT and only go to them if it became necessary for success. So with that, do we want to discuss more? Because it was, Sarah highlighted it fairly well in our staff report. We have concerns with the rural-urban split on when we get federal money, as we just discussed with the TAP, when you're starting with 400,000 and you have to put 100,000 here and 100,000 there, it's a very inefficient use of money. The other thing that we brought to their attention is our county's Clallam gets about $1 million a year in federal transportation dollars. Jefferson about 400, and these are just round numbers, and Mason about 800. In the case of Clallam County with their $1 million, they have to serve the county, Clallam County, the 3 cities, Forks, Port Angeles, and Sequim, their transit, their ports, and their tribes. So when you start dividing up $1 million for 7 or 8 agencies, it dilutes the effectiveness of that money. And we would like to create a resolution or a solution to that that is manageable for everyone and that meets the needs of our members. And again, Kitsap gets our federal funding through PSRC. We have a completely different process. And so we are not, this is not to extend to Kitsap. This is our 3 rural counties. So what Sarah and I had talked about and what this group had talked about in the past is figuring out how we could move this forward. We already did an educational series to try and help our members use the federal dollars more efficiently. But now we would like, if with your permission, if it's agreeable, if it's something you even want to talk about, we would like to form a subcommittee and start working on some details on this as to what would really be beneficial, what could you really use, what would make your life easier and make use of the monies more efficient. So that's where I would like to start the conversation. Is there anyone who would like to provide comment? Commissioner Dean.
Yeah, just kind of logistical questions. Is there an active bill that has been considered in the legislature that's still alive? Do we have a potential sponsor? Like, is this legislative or could this be within WAC, administrative code? Just if you could help me understand kind of
our hope is that we
process.
don't have to have a legislative ask.
Okay.
Our hope is that we can create a process that is beneficial to our jurisdictions and is beneficial to DOT. And that we would work with DOT to make this happen. We would only go to our legislators if we could not come to a reasonable solution with DOT.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And if I could jump into, there's some timing benefits right now because of the new Federal Transportation Act that was passed as a part of the infrastructure bill. Over the next 6 months or so, maybe a little longer, the governor's office will convene a group of stakeholders from around the state to figure out how those funds that come to Washington state in big blocks, like the STBG funds, how they get distributed across the state. And this would be an opportunity to inform that discussion so that if federal funds need to continue going to rural communities, that the most flexible federal funds are the ones that are going to rural communities, not the ones that have to be parsed out into urban and rural pots of money. So it should be easier to inform that process before it's finalized than to try to go back later and ask them to change it. So there's actually a very good opportunity to go into that. There are also other regions like PRTPO across the state that are very interested in this as well, as is the Association of Washington Cities and the Washington Association of County Engineers. There are a variety of things floating around. We went back to the TAC in November to revisit the strategies that PRTPO looked at in 2020, sort of doing a little background white paper about how this could proceed. And there's still support for those going forward. There's also still support for if somebody else is going to lead the effort to completely swap the federal funds for state funds. There's support for signing on to that effort as long as it doesn't exclude transit and multimodal projects, depending upon the funding source that those state funds would come from. The 18th Amendment restricts their use, so restricts use of gas tax funds. So we'd want to make sure that if those funds were being flexed for state funds, that it wasn't precluding, multimodal solutions as a consequence of that. So the subcommittee, the idea of a subcommittee is that with the board meeting every 2 months, we could have a couple, 2 or 3 more in-depth work sessions and talk through how to approach both WSDOT, local programs, maybe other regions in the state or these other associations, and then be able to come back to the board with some pretty specific messaging and actions to follow up on in February.
David, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm glad Thera mentioned I think what they're called the Gang of 4 or 5 or Gang of 9 or whatever.
It's big.
Yeah, getting together, because that's actually the first key point, decisions. I mean, trying to prioritize what the RTPO wants to do and where they can actually have action in the short term and long term is very important. And the most important thing coming forward right now is actually the state local split of gas tax and STP. Right now, the state gets disproportionately and always had a disproportionate amount of money that they keep, and a very small amount goes down to the locals. And that's going to be one of the first decisions coming up, especially with the new federal law coming forward, is how that money is going to be split up. And that's the first one, working with the counties and the Association of Cities, and to find that common language. And that's probably would be our #1 priority, is to get that split more towards the locals as we go through. Sorry, Dennis. As we go forward. The second one I think Thera was pointing out is, again, prioritizing. It is that one, can you do the money laundering, the cleaning of the money is probably the one that you have the most possibility of getting passed in a session. And then the other ones are kind of minor but important changes that you may be able to add in. But going after those first 2 is probably the best way for the RTPO, is definitely going after the local state split and going after, I just call it money laundering, the old Program Z elements that WSDOT used to have many years ago.
What comes to my mind listening to you, David, the first thing that comes to my mind is the RPTO has limited resources, and the items that you're talking about, the gas tax split, that's something that that we can provide education on for our members to work with their legislators on. Okay, and I think what we were hoping to do, or at least I had envisioned it, for a subcommittee to get together and have some education and understand what really would be beneficial to us and how we would go about that. And I agree with you. I think that we're going to need some support from some of the other RTPOs. If not, we're going to be just doing something exclusively for us. But again, are there any other comments or questions, or are there people who would be interested on sitting on that subcommittee?
You don't want to let Beck and I loose on this.
That's right.
I'm happy to participate.
Okay. Steve Gray, are you there?
I am.
Okay, so can I raise your hand?
I would be definitely interested in doing that. I guess the question I would have is, I mean, it looks like we've discussed on several occasions the kind of the focus of what the PRTPO can or can't do,
right?
Particularly like the rural split. what do you see the subcommittee doing? I mean, like David was saying, I think the swap is still, I understand why the PRTPO can't be focused on it, but maybe given what we heard from Representative Theringer, at least a letter or something endorsed by the PRTPO that would say this is still important, we just can't carry the heavy lifting might be a good first step. I'd be more than happy to sit on the subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Deidre has in there that she's able to too. I think what we would like to do, if the executive board is agreeing, we will move this forward to a subcommittee, and we will also reach out to some of our technical folks who are the ones who deal with those federal dollars and what would make their life easier. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, it does. It does. And just so you all know too, there are other I think Association of Cities and counties they know that you all are interested in this. So the subcommittee, one of the things that the subcommittee might be doing is just providing us with some additional input as we figure out how to coordinate messages and what is it of their platform that we think that PRTPO could sign on to fully, and then again bring that back to the board for its full approval. At a certain point in this process, the educational aspects of this might come to a close per se, and it might become more of advocacy. And those are again things where we would want the board members themselves to be really up to speed on the messages and who we're trying to have understand these issues, and somebody different might be carrying that message at that point than, say, staff.
I don't know that we need a motion. I'm seeing some consensus. I'm seeing heads nod. Okay, so we will go ahead and set up a subcommittee, and hopefully we can get some educational information behind us so that we have something of more detailed value for you in February. Okay. And Sarah, moving on down our agenda, I think we're a little light on time here.
We'll catch up.
Pardon?
We'll catch up.
Oh yeah, I know we will. The freight funding opportunities.
Yeah. This is one I wanted to bring to your attention. I know this won't be a priority for all of you, but for those of you who have interest in obtaining either state or federal funds for freight projects between now and 2025, there are two processes coming up early in the year that you are going to want to be paying attention to. And one of them will be, we are expecting the call for projects right after the first of the year. And WashDOT will need PRTPO's prioritization of projects from this region by the 1st of March. So in part, I'm letting those of you who have freight projects that you'd like to get funding for, I want you to know that this is coming up, and as soon as we can get any details on it, we're going to get that out to you. But also for the rest of you, this is a bit unusual. This is, I don't have any details about what this process is going to look like yet. It'll be driven very much by the freight program at WashDOT, but that will be coming to you in February. And then again, those of you with freight interests, there will be a second call from FMCIB, from the Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board, in March or possibly April at the latest for freight projects. Both of those processes are going to result in lists of freight projects that will be given to the legislature by December 1st, 2022, and they will inform funding decisions for how state and federal freight funds will be programmed. The staff report lays out what's known today about both processes. The state process, the WashDOT process, will result in a list of projects for federal freight funding, and the FMCIB process will result in a list of projects for state freight funds. The two processes are aware of each other. They're, as I looked at the details that are known today, they're not in conflict. They have similar interests. One thing I do know that there, well, for two big things that I point out in there. One is connecting Washington projects that are freight projects that are not fully funded. Both of those processes are assuming that those will be high priority projects. This is of concern for the SR3 freight corridor project, a connecting Washington project that may not have full funding in hand. And I've reached out to them and have not received the final confirmation back as to whether they still need funding, but that is one project that is obviously has been a regional priority for as long as I've been with you guys. And so that's one thing. And the other one is Gorst. Gorst is in one of those processes, in the process that requires a PRTPO prioritization that is going to get added to their statewide competitive score. Gorst will not be on, it is not PRTPO's responsibility to prioritize projects out of the urban part of Kitsap County. Those projects will be identified and prioritized by PSRC. Again, on the same schedule, they will need to get their prioritized list to WashDOT by the 1st of March. But for those of you, Gorst has been, again, a regional priority for a long time. That will not be on the list of projects that you will be looking at in February. And I wanted you to know why. And I also want those folks for whom Gorst is important to be paying attention to the PSRC comparable to this process. As we have more information, we'll let you know, but this just seemed too important and the timing is going to be too fast to not bring it to you, even though I don't have all the details. So I just would say, if any of you know that you have freight projects that you want to have to go forward, if you wanted to get in touch with me after the meeting or put whoever your staff member is who works on that in touch with me so I can communicate with them most efficiently as we have information, that would be great. I'd welcome that opportunity. Like I said, I know it's only for probably some of you, but all of you will be involved in it in February. So with that, I turn it over to you for any questions or discussion.
David?
Oh yeah, Thera isn't alone in trying to figure out what's happening with this program. Not the FMSID one, that's pretty straightforward FMSID, same process going. But if you remember back in 2016, we updated you worked with every one of the counties in the RPO worked with WashDOT to get rural critical freight corridors identified as we went through. So this is an element of that. So they will actually be WashDOT will be adding rural critical freight corridor designation. So that's definitely one thing you want to look at. Which areas are currently not on that, and that you have a project now, or you're going to start prepping to get that project, going down the line. You want to get it eligible as it went through. And they're basically going to be doubling the in 2016, there was a very small amount of rural and a very small amount of urban. And so it was a very big, tight fight to get any, 1/10 of a mile designations of these categories. They're doubling the amount that's available. So it's freeing it up significantly. And so there are some areas that you want to look at. If you definitely have a project, a freight related project that you want to try and get it into one of those rural or urban critical freight corridors, because you have to have the designation to go after the money. And there's not a lot of money out there, but it helps you no matter what in any grant applications. And WashDOT's still trying to figure this out. On the rural, it's definitely done at WashDOT. And I think all of the peninsula outside of Kitsap is considered in the rural classification as part of that. So they will be the ones designating. Kitsap may be looking at a little bit of trying to get 3 north of Paulsbo and the Hood Canal Bridge added to rural as a possibility. And we're also looking to try and add possibly a section of SR 305 going to the Naval Base Kitsap to support the Navy. Yeah. But there's a lot of confusion on WashDOT's parts and on the RTPO's parts exactly how this is working. Because on WashDOT, there's a little bit of confusion. They are mixing a grant program with a corridor designated planning process, and they're not dividing the two very well. And
Yeah.
so when they briefed PSRC on this, it was exceptionally confusing.
Yeah, David, you're right. And what they did in 2016, they identified the corridors, and then people had to make sure their projects were on the corridors. What they're doing this time, which I actually can see the logic behind it. They're figuring out where the projects are, and then they're going to connect the dots and make those the corridors, so that the corridors, the corridor designation is, that the projects that are priority projects do end up on designated corridors. It'll be interesting to watch. It's why this timing is so tight, because they're going to take that time from March to May to come up with their statewide priorities, and then between May and December get the corridors to match those projects so that everything's eligible by December 1st. Definitely pay attention. We'll keep you all posted.
Sarah, I will add something though, is WashDOT is misinterpreting the 2016 process. And they're trying to do that, because that's what we did in 2016. We go, hey, wait a second, we have these projects, our soon-to-be projects, we want them to be part of the corridor. And we found a way to reinterpret the federal regulations to allow that to happen. And so one thing that's missing though is that if you are so fixated on, it has to be a project going to a grant application this year, that's not planning. So as an example, Gorst, we fought very hard to get Gorst on the urban critical corridor. Not because we wanted to go into the 16 grant program, because we needed the designation to advance the whole corridor concept in future competitions. And so by just saying that this project is, this designation is limited to projects that are only asking for grants in this cycle is not correct. It's not right. Because some of you will have projects that are out 4 years or 5 years, but you need to start to lay the groundwork for being competitive in a grant now and getting that corridor designation.
Thank you.
Because they're saying through 2025, this funding, they're thinking that this will, it'll probably be like the next couple of funding. It really, everything David's saying, right, you really, if you've got a freight project, be thinking strategically about it now.
Commissioner Dean.
Yeah, question. So are we saying that the previous designations will no longer apply, or that they're expanding those designations? And then another question, where would we see the list of existing designated corridors?
They are revisiting the existing corridors. It's sort of their starting point. I don't know the details of how they're going to compare their priority projects with those lists. I just know what they told us. And I will send out to the board after the meeting a link to the information on the WashDOT website. It's also in the staff report, but it'll be easier just to send it to you directly, where you can see where the existing urban and rural routes are, which ones they are, and also see what WashDOT is saying about this process as it currently stands. So I'll send that out after the meeting with something in the subject line about freight corridors, so you can be looking for that specifically.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. David, he'll be our last comment on this subject.
One thing I'd recommend for a peninsula is that they're in the process, is that they actively tell WashDOT that taking a designated corridor off the list right now is not appropriate unless that project that led to that has been completed and fully funded. Is going off, and that should be the local jurisdiction's determination, not WashDOT through this process, because Kitsap County will be actively pursuing that, projects that fought in 2016 to get this designation do not lose it.
Thank you. That seemed to be an important subject to many people. So we thank you all for your comments, David. That was important. And Kate, I hope we got you the information you need. And Sarah will be sending out additional links to everyone. Moving down our agenda, we have, we're running a little behind here. is the launch for our Human Services Transportation Plan. And Thera, this is yours.
Yes, yes. We are, as you know, we are launching the update of the Human Services Transportation Plan. We've talked about this in terms of funding for the program. We're now moving into the nuts and bolts of actually conducting that. I think the staff report, again, in light of the time, I don't want to rehash everything in the staff report, but this is a program that's focused on mobility needs of sort of targeted vulnerable population groups under federal law. It's seniors, people with disabilities, and people with low income. And we're focused on these population groups, the human services providers who make services available to them that they're eligible for, and the mobility providers who get those people to those services. So that's what this program is about. Because it's the Peninsula region and the priorities that have been identified in the earlier plans, we're expanding those 3 mandatory categories to also include our tribal communities, our veteran communities, and to keep compliance with our Title VI requirements, our communities of people who don't speak English well. We are, the first part of this effort as we go out will be to sort of engage with our service providers, both the human service providers and our mobility providers. And this is where I'm hoping that you all can help us with your local knowledge, help your regional PRTPO coordinators know your community is good enough, and make sure that we are reaching out to those organizations that you know of in your communities that are, provide these services and support our populations in this way. And so to that end, what I had in the staff report on page 3 was a list of those organizations that we have engaged previously. And these are the folks from most recently from the 2019 plan. And so if you know either today or sometime soon, hopefully, groups that are missing from this. I've got a short list sort of going on the side for myself, just wondering, would these groups be involved? But you all are going to know who is or isn't sort of doing work in your community that might not be on our radar. If they're not on this list, they're not on our radar. And if you would let us know, you could shoot me an email, or again, if you've got somebody today you want to pipe up with, we're going to start working. We're going to start reaching out to these folks here right after the first of the year to get an inventory of services and start gearing up for the more detailed engagement. We will be bringing a consultant on board to help with that, to do some of that legwork for us, and also to develop some of the digital products that we will want to use. We're going to sort of piggyback onto our GIS contract and I think come out with some really nice products for this. So things will, you will have something from Human Services Transportation Plan on your agendas basically from now through this time next year. So every one of your meetings will have something. This month it really is focused on making sure we know the right providers and service providers and mobility providers in your communities to be working with. So I would turn it over to you for any discussion or questions you might have, any comment, and then again, any suggestions you might have of other entities we should be including on this list.
Sarah, will you be asking board members to attend the meetings, your outreach with these various groups? I'm assuming that most of this will be done virtually. And I didn't know if you were going to do a Zoom type thing or a survey type thing, what that was going to look like. But I believe my question is, would you like the board to be engaged in that with you?
We're going to be coming back to you all in February to talk about the survey design for engagement. And then as a part of that, my timeline should put a little bit more information in there, more of the details of what that engagement looks like and how you all want to be involved. It will, for the foreseeable future, at least the early part of this, it's going to be virtual, and we will be working to come up with the details of what that looks like and mitigating as best as we can for any barriers that presents. But I also think it opens up doors for participation. So we will be coming back to you to find out how you want to be involved in the details of that engagement.
Okay, Amy.
Yeah, I will mention one transportation provider to add to your list is Coastal Cap.
Yes.
They had received some funding and are providing transportation in Mason County now. And then I also had a question about, I see that there's a lot of engagement with transportation providers. Do you do outreach to social service agencies that work directly with clients so that they can provide input? Because I feel like sometimes as a transportation provider, that's where we get our most valuable information, is from those who are working directly with the people that are using it,
I totally agree.
Okay.
I totally agree. And that's one of the things we want to, I mean, on my short list, I was looking at like some of the veteran services organizations, some of the healthcare providers who do work maybe for dialysis or things like that. But, you know, and so, yes, if you have specific organizations that you know of, please let us know. And even things like Area Agency on Aging, we had several of those human services providers on the list, but my hunch is that the list is not as complete as it could be.
Yeah, I'll send you a list.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Commissioner Dean.
Yeah, and I think this is really time specific, but this time is dragging on longer than we expected. But I think we're seeing in various counties across the state that our departments of emergency management are doing more transportation right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's worth including or not. And, you know, in our case, transit is involved with that. And but it is a bit of an outlier that I don't want to exclude if there's value in including it.
Well, and the dovetail with resiliency and thinking about how are these vulnerable populations accounted for in a resilient manner in case of an earthquake or something like that, and for evacuation purposes, absolutely. So I don't know exactly how that gets folded in, Kate, but I'm glad that you brought that up, and we'll incorporate that.
This is one of the, I don't want to say most important, but it's a very important element of our obligation as an RPTO to have a useful and meaningful human service transportation plan. And the outreach to those communities is very important. And we appreciate your effort in helping us put together this plan, which will come and culminate with the plan, I believe, in summer. Don't we have to have something by August or something?
Yes.
It's a very short time frame that we'll be doing this work.
It's very short, so we're going to be as efficient as we can, and as we're trying to do now, we're trying to build a program that is not starting from scratch and leaves us well positioned to update this again in the future in an efficient way. So we will have a draft plan for you by August, and you will need to adopt it by October. And that timing is driven because next fall, the WSDOT will issue a call for consolidated grants projects. And so it's important for the service providers in our region to know what PRTPO's priority strategies are to inform that consolidated grants process. So yeah, it all ties together. It'll be pretty fast, but that's okay. We can do it.
Well, if you have a deadline, you work to the deadline, and we can get the work done. I would just acknowledge that this next year, we're going to have two different competitions, one for the transportation alternatives in the springtime, and then in the fall, the consolidated grant. And in the meantime, we're going to be updating the human services plan. So anyway, we are really looking forward to a busy next year. Moving on down our agenda, we have the nominations of officers for the next year. Well, it's actually our officers sit for a 2-year term. And what we typically do is we call for nominations and we have a vote for the officers, the first meeting of the year, which is in February. Our officers consist of the chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. And so we will be asking for nominations. If you could get nominations to Sarah 10 days before our February meeting, she could get them in our packet, but you will be able to nominate from the floor in February. As the current chair, I am bringing forth a slate of candidates, and I will talk about them right now, because in keeping with our practice, I'd like to give everyone the information one meeting, let them digest it and vote on it at the following meeting. As you all know, or as I made aware earlier this year, I did not run for re-election on the Port Orchard City Council. However, it was brought to my attention that it is not a requirement that one be an elected official to represent a jurisdiction on the RPTO. And as such, I believe that Port Orchard will be appointing me to continue as their representative for the next 2 years. With that said, I would like to remain on as chair, so the slate of officers would include me as chair. The Randy Netherland, a commissioner from Mason County, has admirably served as our vice chair the last 2 years. He has been extremely supportive and a delight to work with. So I would be bringing him forth on the slate to be the vice chair for the next 2 years. Tammy Rupert has been our secretary the last 4 years, and she is terming out. And as we all know, Tammy is Jefferson Transit's executive director. So I thought about who might be appropriate to fill this secretary position. So we have a Jefferson Transit person rolling off of the executive committee. The last person we had roll off the executive committee was Annette Nessie, who had served as 8 years representing the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe. And because we had someone from Kitsap and someone from Mason County, I looked to S'Klallam County to fill the secretary role, because Jefferson had just come off, and so I looked to Jefferson County, or to S'Klallam County. I looked for an elected official who's been actively engaged in the RPTO, and I invited Lindsay Schwarm Warren to consider being our nominee for secretary on the slate, and Lindsay graciously agreed to that. So the slate that I'm bringing forward will be myself as chair, Randy Netherland as vice chair, and Lindsay Schwarm Warren as secretary. Now, again, you are all welcome and invited to bring forth your own nominations. This was just a slate that I thought would have an effective leadership role for the Peninsula RPTO. So again, if you would like a nomination to be included in our packet, FARA typically needs that information 10 days before the packet goes out. So we can send you a reminder. And then, of course, you're always available, or it's always appropriate to nominate from the floor. So with that said, I'm also going to just let everyone know that sitting on the executive board as a non-elected from one of our jurisdictions is not the first time it's happened. When I first came on the executive board, Bremerton had a non-elected as their executive board representative. So with that, we will move on down to Thera, your coordinators report.
Beck, before we move to Thera, I just want to say, so as one of the people tapped for this slate of nominees, I just want to say, and this is from a conversation Beck and I had earlier this week, that we really want to have a very democratic PRTPO. Yeah. And part of that means contested elections if people are interested in stepping forward to that. So please do not feel like you're stepping on anybody's toes by saying, hey, I'd like to be in that place as well. I think it would be great if we had more people expressing interest in being on the executive board. So again, for everybody, like, don't feel like this decision's been made and Beck just crowned herself queen or something like that.
That's right.
This is a process where we want to make sure we have people ready to step into those leadership roles and not be left flat-footed at our next meeting. But also, this is a process that's open to everybody. Thank you.
The other thing Lindsay and I talked about, and I have mentioned this several times, is it's very important for members of the RTPO to be engaged in many different levels on the subcommittees, working with the Human Services Plan. It's the decisions are made by the executive board. They are not made by the executive committee. And Lindsay and I did have that conversation, and I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable and welcome to bring forth any names they would like to. No, I was not intending to crown myself queen, but I do know that Randy and I and Tammy worked very good together last year, and I was looking to expand that to include someone from Clallam County. Just so that everyone knows the reasons why those are the particular people that I was bringing forth, that I would be nominating, but anyone is welcome to nominate. So with that, if there's no more comments on that, we will move down to the coordinator's report.
Sure. As always, information is there. Please follow up with me if there's anything that jumps out at you. A couple of things to highlight real quickly. First is in January, I'll be reaching out to all of your organizations to get your new appointments for the 2022 year. Just as a reminder, we will look for appointments for both the executive board and for the technical advisory committee. And we will look for, if possible, a primary representative and an alternate for both of those. And it can be the same person for both boards, or it can be different. So as you can see, looking around the room, different members approach it differently. So look for that in January. For those of you who have staff who have to deal with stormwater issues, I will push out maybe today or probably early next week a save the date notice for the technical advisory committee meeting in January. There's some significant changes coming down with how stormwater rules are interpreted for all of our counties that touch the water, that touch Puget Sound. And so it's going to potentially, make it much more difficult to stay on schedule for your projects in order for you to get your environmental approval. So we've scheduled a meeting with Melanie Vance at WSDOT headquarters to talk us through in detail how those rules are changing and what to expect in terms of that. And do you really want to put federal money on that project? We'll also at that same meeting hear about an opportunity that Marty's involved in through WSU to identify some pilot projects for some alternate stormwater management techniques. So it's going to be really focused on stormwater. I think it's timely ahead of both construction season and federal funding opportunities. And it is one of those work sessions where we will invite colleagues of TAC members, anybody who's working on stormwater, who has to deal with stormwater and environmental permitting, invite them to attend. And then the last thing just to share with you to make sure it doesn't get lost in there is that today is the last day for John Winans to be regional administrator for Olympic Region. He is retiring. Today is his last day, and Steve Rourke will be is the incoming new regional administrator. And we will try to find a time early in the year, maybe April, to see if Steve would come have a meeting with the board, introduce himself to the board in his new capacity. I think a lot of you might know him already, and just sort of give us sort of what he's seeing coming up in terms of Olympic Region at that high level policy, programmatic direction, and new ways to collaborate and cooperate together. So that's my really quick abbreviated report. And again, follow up with me on any of these things.
Yeah, do you know, maybe John knows, Kate may know, anyone may know. Do you know who was elected chair of the Senate Transportation Committee?
No, I want to say I heard, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't heard an announcement. I haven't heard an announcement yet. I know the House did their appointments yesterday, but I've not heard about Senate.
Okay, because I thought there was a vote Monday or Tuesday. For some reason, it seems to me there was a vote Monday or Tuesday because Hobbs is now Secretary of State. And so that was an open
I think they
position.
just, I do know that they just replaced his seat. So I don't, but I haven't heard about.
Oh, okay, maybe
that
his
might, and that was
seat was
just, that was like
replaced.
Tuesday.
Okay.
I think that was Tuesday.
Okay,
I
that
had
may
a conversation yesterday with Senator King, and he had given me a name, but for the life of me, I forgot who it was. So it's either who is expected to be put into that position, or whether they've actually done the vote yet. I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just curious. So we will now, because this is an open public meeting, do we have anyone who wishes to provide public comment?
I would.
Okay, oh, thank you, Michael. Yes.
Thank you for inviting the Quinaultony Nation to the meeting, and I hope that we will join as full partners in calendar year 22. My comment, it was more along the lines of, I've been nominated by the Washington State chapter of the American Planning Association to be elected to the College of Fellows. So again, that is a huge, essentially end of career type of acknowledgement of doing good planning over decades. So again, I am quite honored by that, etc. And hopefully that will be come to fruition in 2022. Certainly, I'm not just going to be resting on getting an F behind my name. Certainly, with the legislature approaching, we are taking a look at, I believe it's 1241 House Bill, where we were looking to update the Growth Management Act to be more inclusive of Native nations. As you may know, GMA was written back in 1990, essentially before the Gaming Act and as such. So again, the tribes were in a whole different financial situation then than they are now. So again, we are looking to become partners and with the state and continue that development. And certainly we want to make sure that the state departments honor the Centennial Accord by working with Native nations. And one of the things I want to applaud you all on is that the PRTPO seem to actually get it right and are doing outreach to tribes and are bringing them into the conversation. And I'm very honored and pleased by that. And certainly, I hope the rest of the Washington State agencies can follow your lead. So I applaud you, and I wish for a better 22. Thank you very much.
Yes, and Michael, and congratulations, well deserved. And I will just also acknowledge that with the Peninsula RPTO, our tribal partners are very important to us. They've been very active in our transportation. Jamestown S'Klallam has done remarkable work, as well as the Skokomish. I don't mean to eliminate or miss anyone else, but I kind of drive by those nations frequently, and they have been very, very good partners to us. So we appreciate the tribal nations that we have within our jurisdictions. Thank you. Is there anything, Dennis, I see that, okay, just before, Dennis, you turned on your camera. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I have a list of all the Senate committees, and it is Senator Elias, I think is how it's pronounced, is the chair for the Transportation Committee.
I think it's Leah's, but thank you.
Thank you. Kate, was that what you were going to confirm?
Yeah, those have been assigned, and then they do not get confirmed until they're in session in January. But yeah, Mark Elias and then King is the ranking member.
Thank you. Is there any member updates? Is there any members who want to give us updates of what's happening in your area? Seeing none, I would like to thank everyone for their time this morning, your attention this morning, and wish all of you a great holiday season, and we will see you in February. So, and some of us expect to be contacted about our subcommittee. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, everybody.
Merry Christmas, y'all.
Merry Christmas.